gentlemen, welcome to my new video. This is my second video of the day. Hope you enjoyed my first one I did earlier. It was about India-Pakistan war. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the trade war going on between United States and China. The latest is they had a meeting, United States and China, in Geneva in Switzerland over the weekend, and the White House basically said that a trade deal has been reached, but this has been obviously talked back by Trump and various people in the White House, saying trade deal has not been reached. Basically, it's fake news. What's been reached is an understanding to talk further, and they're going to provide more details tomorrow, which is Monday, the 12th of May. So we're going to get more details tomorrow, but I wouldn't put my hopes up, to be honest, because China is not going to agree to anything until Trump reduces all the tariffs back to zero. And we'll see if Trump agrees that or not. If he doesn't, then China's not going to budge. Because at the end of the day, China is in the driving seat and they hold all the cards, not United States. So what I wanted to talk about in today's video is why China is not going to accept any kind of bullying in this trade war by United States or by Trump. And this goes to all the way back to the Opium Wars. And I studied Chinese history. When I lived in China, I actually studied Chinese history, and I also studied China as well. And one of the things I learned, and I think every Westerner should know about this, is the Opium Wars and the 100-year humiliation. If you can understand what the Chinese went through in the 100-year humiliation, I mean, we're talking about the Opium Wars and people getting hooked on drugs, then the civil wars and the Japanese invasions and what all the atrocities the Japanese did to the Chinese, then all these uneven clauses with Russia, Soviet Union at the time, taking huge parts of the land. And then you had the British and the French going in and burning the Summer Palace, stealing all the treasure of China. You know, China went through a lot of hell in the 100-year humiliation. And they will never ever allow themselves to go through that humiliation ever again. And back then, it was similar to what's happening now. Back then, China was trading with United Kingdom and the West at the time, with the United Kingdom leading. And United Kingdom wanted basically to sell opium to China, and China refused. And back then, they were trading in silver, and United Kingdom was actually running out of silver. And China had a trade surplus with United Kingdom. So that means the UK was buying more from China compared to China buying from UK. So they had a big trade surplus. And the UK, instead of paying with silver, they wanted to pay with opium. And Chinese refused, and the English and the French decided to treat China a lesson. And you had the Opium Wars, the first one and the second one. And as part of the Opium Wars, the Britain took Hong Kong off China, and they used Hong Kong as a trading hub to transport opium throughout all of Asia. So they got everyone hooked on drugs, you know, not only in China, but they also got they used Hong Kong as a base to hook the whole of Asia with drugs. And this is why Asia had been remained poor for centuries, and the British took full advantage of that. And And this is why China doesn't like drugs at all. And this is why anyone that's caught with drugs, they get a very severe penalty. And if you get caught dealing drugs, you could get the death penalty. So they do not mess around when it comes to drugs, and especially because of the 100-year humiliation. Because so many people in China got hooked on drugs, and when you get hooked on drugs, you know that you basically there's no productivity. People just want to get high all the time. They don't want to work. You get very very lazy, and that's what happened. And you can see the effect of drugs in America with fentanyl, 100,000 people dying per year. So many other people just hooked on drugs. They got mental issues. They're walking around the streets like zombies. China does not want that. So, you have to understand the 100-year humiliation to see why China is not going to budge in this trade war, because they see Americans doing the same thing that the British were doing. They are trying to force their, it's just forced bullying basically. They're trying to force their way of trade, force their will against China, same way that the British did against China. And back then they were trading in silver, and now obviously they're trading in dollars. So China's not gonna accept it. China has been propping up the dollar for a long time now. They have been basically helping the American economy by exporting these goods to America, because Chinese goods they have been keeping the inflation down in America. So this is why there's no manufacturing in America. Why manufacture? Why spend a lot of money building factories, paying workers, causing pollution, and going through all of the pain of licenses and law and HR and things like that. They basically decided to outsource all of that to China. So they are getting these goods for free, basically, because the dollar is worth nothing. The dollar is just a piece of paper saying I owe you, but it's not nothing. I mean, it's not pegged to gold. It's not pegged to anything. It's just a piece of paper. So if the American economy collapses, the dollar collapses with it, and the papers just becomes worthless. So you see, China has been propping up the dollar and the American economy for years now. And if China stops doing that, if China stops selling these goods to America, where is America going to buy these goods from? There isn't any other country to buy it from. Yeah, they can buy it from things like Vietnam or like Cambodia. You can have Chinese factories there, but basically it's still going to be more expensive, because you're cutting the middleman when you go directly to China. So if you go to Vietnam and buy Chinese products, obviously Vietnam will have to buy from China, then they will have to mark the price up. Plus you have the tariffs from Vietnam as well, and then then they travel all the way to America as well. So you still got to pay. Still going to be more expensive, but it's still going to be cheaper than if you build it in America. In America, if you have to build factories and hire workers, if you build an iPhone in America, it's going to be 10 times more expensive. Also, I have to make the point that when China sells to America, they have to trade in dollars. So the dollar stays as a reserve currency. And also, those dollars, China has to spend it. And they have to spend most of it in America. They have to buy things like stocks, shares, bonds. So this dollar gets circulated back to United States. So end of the day, United States is not losing in this game of chess. They have their world reserve currency, They can print money at will. They don't have to do any work. They don't have to cause any pollution. They can basically outsource everything. And if another country buys or sells using dollars, the dollars basically stay as reserve currency because the dollar stays strong. And these countries are now forced to buy assets in America, buy stocks and shares and bonds. This builds up the American industries and economy even more. And also, American companies can go to China and they can trade there. They can, sell services and stuff. Right now, American service companies actually have a trade surplus in China. Companies like, service companies like Starbucks, for example. Starbucks is making huge profits in China. And the Chinese Starbucks, I think it's called Liquid. You gotta correct me, damn. I think it's called Liquid. They cannot operate in America. Huawei cannot operate in America. Chinese EV cars cannot operate in America. And Tesla can operate in China. iPhones can operate in China. You have Starbucks, KFC, all these American brands. McDonald's are operating in China. So the American service companies are actually making a profit in China. So it's not a trade surplus on the Chinese side. This is a trade surplus on the American side. So you see, it's a give and take trade. Trump says the other day, "Oh, we're not trading with China over $1 trillion, so we're not losing $1 trillion, so we're basically saving that money." I mean, he doesn't make any sense because he's saying that if you don't trade with China, America is saving money. So you have to trade. I mean, what are you going to do with that money? You're going to have to buy these products from somewhere. So you're going to have to pay more for these products. If you build it in America, you're going to have to pay more. If you buy from another country, you're going to have to pay more. So it tells me that he really doesn't know what he's talking about sometimes. And it's crazy. As a president, he doesn't really understand what trade is, trade surplus and trade deficit. When I want to shop with my supermarket and I go to my supermarket and I spend money in the supermarket, is the supermarket ripping me off? No, it's not. I have a trade deficit with the supermarket because I'm buying their goods and they're taking money off me. So, with trade is give and take. It's a win-win situation. Sometimes you trade with a country with goods that you need, and you can sell, stuff to other countries that if they need from you. That's how trading works. It's not about trade surplus or deficit. And America is one of those few countries where the dollar is the world reserve currency. So it doesn't matter if a country is in surplus or deficit. It doesn't really matter because if a country's selling more goods and they're buying more dollars because of it, then you're still winning as a country because you have that special privilege of having the world reserve currency. So he hasn't really thought this through. And having all these tariffs against all of these countries and China, this means that these countries will trade less with America. China will trade less with America because they will sell their products elsewhere and they will buy from other countries. So they will diversify their buying and selling. That means there's going to be less dollars being circulated, and that means that the dollar's price will go down and the dollar will one day stop becoming the world reserve currency because not many people are going to be trading with the United States and using the dollar. So Trump hasn't really thought this through very well. And I want to talk about the next trade deal that was done with UK. And this trade deal was done on UK a few days ago. And it's probably the worst trade deal ever, guys. UK has become the first country to kiss Donald Trump's ass, by the way. Because I don't know if you remember the when Donald Trump was basically went on stage and he said all these countries were lining up to kiss my ass, blah blah blah. And guess what? Britain is the first country to do a trade deal with Trump. So Britain is officially the first country to kiss his ass. But this deal is so bad for Britain because they still have to pay an extra 10% tariffs on British goods, and uh, and this is going to be bad for Britain because this means British goods are becoming more expensive. So Americans will probably diversify and not buy British goods. They will probably diversify and buy from other countries. And also, this is bad news because 6 months ago, before Trump came in power, Britain had no tariffs. And in fact, Britain was one of the few countries that had a trade deficit with the United States, which means United States had a surplus with Britain. That means the United States was selling more goods to Britain than the other way around. So this is a really bad deal. And the worst thing about this deal is you can see from this title, Starmer hands Trump veto on Chinese investment in UK. So this is Trump's plan basically. He wants to have this deal where he forces countries not to trade or not to have investments from China. So he's trying to turn the whole world against China, and that's his plan basically. And Britain is the first country that's fallen for it. So he's signed the deal. Starmer signed the deal, and basically there's a veto on Chinese investments in UK. So if Huawei wants to invest in UK, America can veto it and said no, sorry, you're not allowed. Which means America basically controls United Kingdom and who kind of invests in United Kingdom or not. Complete loss of sovereignty, and it's a complete shame, and it's absolutely humiliating as a British. When I see things like this, it's absolutely humiliating to watch. Starmer basically is desperate and he will sign anything you give him, and it's a shame really. And Britain actually signed another deal with India, and they signed such a bad deal with India where you have Indian nationals, they don't have to pay national insurance or tax for 3 years, and the British nationals do, and it's just and 250,000 Indians are coming into UK every single year. There's more than 2 million Indians working in UK, so you can see this is a big number. So you can see, Britain is getting really, really bad deals right now, and it's a real shame to be British right now. Watching all of this, it's just a shame. And you see, you look around other countries, you see countries which are very, for example, China. Even China is the first country which actually fought back against these tariffs. When Trump first announced these tariffs, China fought back, said, we will put our tariffs up the same as Trump. Then Trump increased it, then China increased it, then Trump increased it, and China increased it. If we had a strong leader like that and stop United States from bullying UK, then that leader would have had so much respect in UK. But he's just a snivelling coward. Absolute snivelling coward. We just need a strong leader. Somebody like George Galloway would have been perfect. He would have said no. We're not going to stand for this kind of behavior. If Starmer stood up and said, Trump, if you do not take down these tariffs, then we will not trade with you, and we will basically start trading with China. We'll build links with China. We'll start having relationship with China, and we will allow Chinese businesses to thrive in UK, and we will kick out businesses, American businesses like Apple, like X, and other, SpaceX and Tesla from UK. So if we had a strong leader like that and kind of push back on Trump, I'm sure Trump would have been scared and pushed into a corner, and Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have strong leaders like that. So it's a bit of a shame, really. But yeah, that UK deal is mainly about China, to be honest. And that's what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to get other countries to sign a deal. And in the small print, it's going to say you're not allowed Chinese investments. You're not allowed to trade with China, even some countries maybe. And I think that's the whole point of Trump. But luckily, China is fighting back. They're not taking it. They're not taking this bullying kind of trade. They call it the art of the deal. I mean, Trump didn't even write that book. He didn't even read his own book, and he's probably the worst salesman I have ever seen in my life. He knows nothing about trade. He changes his mind every single day. He wakes up one morning. He says he puts this much tariff on. He wakes up the next morning. He puts that much tariff on. Next morning he takes it away. Next morning he puts it back on. There's no stability. As a business, as a country, there is no stability. You don't know what's happening from one day to the next with Trump. It's too unpredictable. Companies, countries like stability. You can do business with stability, but if a company or country is too unstable, it's worth not even doing any business with them. It's just not worth it. You're better off just doing business by yourself. And China would be fine. You remember the first trade war when Trump started. He banned Huawei, and he put all of these technology sanctions on China. They were not allowed to buy any chips or chip making equipment. He put so many sanctions on China in his first term. But China learned from that, and they learned. They built up their own semiconductor industry. They diversified their trade with other countries. They diversified countries. They buy, you know, soybeans and other agricultural products. They buy it from Russia and Brazil and other countries. So China has been preparing since the first trade war that Trump started, and this is why China has all the cards, and they're much more prepared this time than they were the first time. And I think this second trade war, I think China can fight it and win it, and China will become stronger as a result. After the first trade war, China became extremely strong. Now they have their own semiconductor industry. They all of their trade is diversified. So this second trade war, I think, if China decides just not to trade with the United States anymore, just focus on other countries, the dollar will fall because China's not going to be using these dollars anymore, these fake dollars. They're not going to be propping up the dollar anymore. They're not going to help the American industry when it comes to inflation. America will have to buy these goods somewhere else, which is going to be more expensive. And also, China doesn't need if China doesn't need to trade with the United States, that means they can start dumping the dollars. So China can start dumping treasuries. They can start dumping stocks. American economy is going to collapse if this happens. This is why Trump has not thought this through. This is why he's this is not a good businessman, guys. He's failed in six times. He went bankrupt 6 times. And he's a trust fund kid. His parents were rich. He was given the money, and each time he was bankrupt, he was saved by his Jewish friends. He had a good link up with his he had lots of influential Jewish people that were kind of supporting him at the time. He was friends with Epstein as well and many other Jews. And this is why he does all the stuff for the Jews right now. He is Jewish, Israel's best president, basically. And yeah, he's just not a good businessman. He's even failed a casino. I mean, how can he bankrupt a casino? He is literally the worst. I mean, this guy, the art of the deal, they call it. I mean, this is more like fart of the deal. He just doesn't have a clue. He's just a used car salesman or a con man pretending to be a president. I mean, I think this is what he comes out to be like. These people are not serious whatsoever, guys. You cannot deal with these people. These are not serious people. But yeah, I think China's and the rest of the world has got 4 more years of this. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, he started this trade war with all of his allies as well. I mean, if this was all about China, then just have the trade war with China and build links with the rest of your allies. But he's not done that. He's basically started a trade war with all of his allies, all of the countries. So and he wants all of the other countries to basically have a clause in there to not trade with China or not have any investments from China. I mean, why would they do that? I mean, well, if you're gonna, he's Trump has just placed sanctions against all of these countries. So why would they listen to what he wants to say? I mean, all of this trade wars, other countries are just going to trade more with China because China doesn't have these barriers. Plus, China doesn't have Trump as a leader. So other countries will find China much more stable, much more easier to work with. So more countries will come and trade with China. And if you look at the last month's export and import results, China actually exported more in the month of April, and exports have gone up by 8%, which is a huge number. And while American ports are empty, and there's going to be empty shelves if Trump doesn't do something soon. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, guys. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.